To read a letter dated September 14th, addressed to the Governor's Council. Executive Council, dear councilors, I'm pleased to nominate Brian Palmucci to the position of Associate Justice of the District Court. Sincerely, Charles Baker. At this point, before we hear from you, I know you have a lot of distinguished folks here. We see the Honorable Judge Bradley. So at this point, we'll hear from Judge Heather Bradley first.
Do you want me to come stand?
You can stand or sit, whatever you like.
Fine. Thank you, Chairman. Ianella, members of the Governor's Council, good morning, and thank you for allowing me to be here today. For those of you I have not met, as indicated, my name is Heather Bradley. I'm the First Justice of the Hingham District Court, and I am honored to have the opportunity to say a few words on behalf of Attorney Brian Palmucci. I've had the pleasure of working with Attorney Palmucci in court since I became an Associate Justice of the District Court almost 12 years ago. Attorney Palmucci appeared before me then regularly when I traveled to Quincy District Court, and over the past 7 years that I've been the First Justice of the Hingham District Court, Attorney Palmucci has been a consistent presence in our court, handling all aspects of criminal district work, from arraignments through to trials, sentencing, and post-conviction matters. He has also represented civil litigants in 209A and 258A hearings, which comprise a substantial part of the civil work that we see in district court on a daily basis. From the work I've seen him perform as an attorney in court, I believe Attorney Palmucci possesses the experience, knowledge, intelligence, and temperament to make an excellent district court judge. He is always prepared before the court, always on time, and attentive to his clients. He works well with his colleagues. He's a team player when it comes to working in the courtroom. As I mentioned in the letter I wrote on his behalf, he's the type of attorney who will assist the court and his fellow colleagues when conflicts arise and stay to help, even though his own cases are done for the day. Always doing his part to help the court run efficiently and ensure that people's rights are protected. On his cases, he files appropriate, accurate, and well-researched, well-written motions that show his understanding of the law and the relevant case law. He is articulate and reasoned in his arguments, whether he's handling an arraignment or a lengthy trial. Attorney Palmucci has always shown respect in my court, respect for the court process, and respect to the parties appearing in court, not only as clients, but also witnesses and victims for the prosecution. I've never seen him raise his voice or treat anyone in court in an unkind manner. In my observations of him, he has shown the ability to maintain a calm demeanor in the face of difficult litigants and maintain a tone of respect in the courtroom, which is essential to being a district court judge. My staff believes that he is a hardworking individual, and he has earned their praise over the years in each of our departments, the clerk's office, probation, and security, who all have positive things to say about their experiences with him. Attorney Palmucci shows in his advocacy a passion for the law and an ability to view cases based on relevant circumstances. I recall one case he had before me with a young man struggling with mental health issues and substance use disorder. Attorney Palmucci not only worked diligently to litigate the criminal matter by filing well-drafted motions and making strong arguments to the court, but he also worked to support his client in changing his life. By the end of that case, the defendant appeared before the court a very different person with an admirable period of sobriety under him and an impressive employment position. And since the resolution of that case, this client has not returned to my court. Attorney Palmucci's treatment of this case and the litigant, I believe, shows his awareness of the importance of looking at a case both in terms of its legal aspects, but also the unique circumstances and backgrounds of the litigants, witnesses, and victims who appear, which are both essential to making fair and impartial decisions as a judge. An important part of the work that occurs in the district court today involves the use of specialty courts for our veterans and for those struggling with substance use. Specialty court work requires collaboration with treatment providers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, law enforcement, and corrections. Attorney Palmucci's experience working with and for all these agencies gives him the knowledge, I believe, and the unique ability to step right into this type of important work with specialty courts in the district court, where I believe he could be of great assistance to the trial court and the communities we serve. In closing, I simply just want to add that if Attorney Palmucci is given this wonderful opportunity to serve the public as a judge in the district court, I am confident that he will continue to work with the type of diligence, humility, and respect that I have seen him work with over the years as an attorney and leave a long-lasting and positive impact on the trial court. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And Councilor Terrence Kennedy.
Judge, you were my first vote when I got on the council, and you have made me very proud of that vote. You've done a fantastic job, very well respected in the Hingham District Court and throughout the district. You have a great reputation among the lawyers as a very thoughtful judge who tries to do the right thing all the time. I occasionally get to Hingham Court, not too often, and I can tell you that the people in the courthouse have a great deal of respect for you too. In the clerk's office, in the staff, the security personnel, just doing a great job down there. And I'm very proud of that first vote that I took 12 years ago, I think it was.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I'm very fortunate, and I have a great team in Hingham.
You're a home run. You're doing a great job.
Councilor Devaney.
Yes, it's the first time you've been here.
It has.
Yeah. I find the question and the questionnaire very important about the most important cases. When you came, it was asking in 5 cases, trials, transactions, and Attorney Palmucci has put civil and criminal, which is very good. Now, do you remember what you put?
I don't remember. It's been 12 years.
In those days, you were asked to name 5 trials, transactions, courts that you have been involved in. And you answered Girl Scout leader in Hingham, and you put Law Day, which I thought was very unique. And I have to say, you're going down in judicial history because you're the only nominee that came before the council who worked at home for 22 hours for the district attorney. I want to ask you, do you think it's important for a person to be...
Excuse me. Yes. Excuse me. This hearing, I'm not sure if you were...
No, I'm asking about...
Excuse me, I said. Excuse me. This hearing is regarding Attorney Brian Palmucci.
Yes, and I'm not...
Excuse me.
She thinks that he has court experience.
Excuse me. You can answer the question, do you think this nominee has court experience? That you can...
Thank you, Councilor Devaney, for the question regarding Attorney Palmucci. And again, I'm happy to be here to speak about him and on his behalf. I do believe that Attorney Palmucci has a lot of court experience. He is... I believe that...
Much is important.
I believe that well, I don't think you can put an amount of court experience on the role of a judge, but I do believe that court experience, trial experience is important. And Attorney Palmucci has shown, I believe, with his background, his work, 18 years as an attorney, that he's done civil and criminal work, and he has that trial experience. And in the district court, I believe that I've seen him do every thing that comes into district court on the criminal side. And as I said, but you might not have heard this portion of my remarks, he's also appeared in front of me regularly on civil matters, 209As and 258Es, which are a majority of what we see on a daily basis on the civil side in district court.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
He has definitely had the experience representing litigants in those civil matters and also on all the criminal matters from arraignment through to trial, sentencing, and post-conviction relief.
I agree. I like the idea that he's had more criminal cases than civil. And I think he has a good balance of both. And I just thought in meeting with him and his questionnaire, I was very happy. And I'm especially happy that that he has his own law practice, because he chooses who he's going to represent. And I think that's important. It isn't like being and I think it's great working for a district attorney or whatever, but you're given the case, the police gives you the report, you start from scratch. And I think, that's it. So I thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Yes, just want, Counsel, I know you came in late. Judge Bradley got into detail before you got here about Mr. Palmucci's court experience, both in the civil and criminal side. But having said that, I don't have any questions, Judge. I think you're doing a remarkable job. I want to echo the sentiments of Counselor Kennedy. I've never appeared, oh God, I don't know, 30 years. I don't know if I've ever appeared in the Hingham District Court, maybe once. Was Clerk Lagotti, was he in that court at one point? I think I went there once years ago. He's gone, yeah. Yeah, no, you're doing a great job. People who appear before you, they're not always happy, nor is anyone always happy with the decision, but you're fair. You let people speak. You treat people with respect and dignity, and that's all we can ask of anyone. And it's great to see you again, and keep up the great work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's good to be here.
Next, we'll hear from Z City Councilor Nina Lang. Good morning.
Councillor Devaney, Councillor Dubinville, Councillor Ferreira, Councillor Ianella, Councillor Duff, Councillor Kennedy, and Councillor Hurley, I believe, is tuning in virtually. My name is Emily Yang, and I'm here in my capacity as a four-term at-large city councillor in Quincy. It's an honor to appear in front of you this morning, not just because I have an opportunity to speak about a dear colleague, mentor, and friend, but because I have this opportunity at all. As a child of immigrants, I was born and raised in a city that I now get to represent, but the road here hasn't been an easy one. However, I count myself lucky to still be here today, and one of the reasons is Brian Palmucci. Growing up, my grandmother raised my 3 siblings, 10 cousins, and me with one underlying mission: to leave any place we are better than we find it. I never understood how that could translate to public service, and certainly wasn't taught what it meant with respect to civic engagement, much less elected office. What it meant instead was to keep your head down, to keep quiet, get by with what you've got, and that no one is going to do the work for you. It led us to starting a few mom and pop restaurants, which then led to what's today the JP Fuji Group. The process of this growth and transition for my family meant good and bad growing pains. The good was the plethora of opportunities to engage directly with communities, hiring locally, donating our resources to local causes, and getting active in our service back to those who had given us so much. The bad, however, was feeling like despite all of it, we still weren't being engaged on the decision-making process that effectively decided if we were going to be able to keep our doors open day to day. It was in that frustration that someone said to me, "Well, then you should run for city council." I laughed and told the person I didn't know what a city councilor was, much less how to run for it. I voted all of twice up until that point in the presidential election, despite my neighbor across the street being a city councilor and my neighbor down the street being a state rep. I can't tell you what either of them did, but I was lucky. I had amazing mentors in the industry to help me, and surprisingly, even for myself, I got elected to serve my city. I thought that was the biggest hurdle I'd had to get over, but it wasn't. When you're running, no one tells you that getting elected is one thing, but actually doing the job you're elected to do is an entirely different beast. After, of course, they tell you it's like drinking water from a fire hose. They tell you it's trial by fire. They tell you it's learning to ride the bike and building it at the same time. Imagine that each of you here know to some extent what I mean. I knew what I wanted to get done, but I had zero idea on how I was supposed to do it. I floundered, I made mistakes, I had too many questions, and sometimes didn't even know what questions to ask. Despite growing up in the city, serving my community in many different capacities, and running a local business, when it came to serving it as an elected official, something people voted me in and trusted me to do, I was lost. I was the youngest person serving on the council, only one of 3 women, and the only Chinese American having ever served that city. I felt the weight of everything and was confident I knew nothing. But again, I was lucky. Out of the 8 colleagues I served with, one of them reached out and introduced themselves. And that person was Brian Palmucci. He taught me what Robert's rules were and how to use them properly to move through and engage in a council meeting. He taught me the different types of legislation that could be introduced and how to write them to make sure my point was succinct and direct. He taught me how to digest a budget, big legislation that we take up as a body, and how to communicate effectively with those who work in City Hall to get things done. Someone once told me very early on, know the power of your voice. Brian is the one who taught me what that actually meant. In the last 7 years, our relationship went from colleague to mentor to friend. For those who don't know, as much as Quincy has changed over the years, it's still got a long way to go. One of the changes I wanted to make was to create an LGBTQ commission. I remember over the course of 3 years, doing research, visiting other communities and commissions, writing and rewriting legislation, Brian finally gave me the push I needed to get on the finish line. As a champion of LGBTQ issues well before my time on the council, Brian was the partner I needed to make it happen. He did. Shortly thereafter, during the Black Lives Matter movement and Stop Asian Hate, Brian approached me to ask the question that was on all of our minds. What are we going to do to address this? The difference with Brian, though, is that he didn't stop until we found a solution. He was unafraid, as a cis, straight, white man, to admit that he didn't know what he didn't know, but that alone shouldn't mean inaction. In fact, he stressed, and then being responsible for educating oneself and creating opportunities to make sure that the people most impacted had a safe space to be heard. He extended the invitation to all of us on the City Council to lead a listening series and spearheaded the initiative to hold a series of community conversations to hear from everyone in the community on all sides of the issue. The takeaway from these meetings was a resounding one, that we needed a dedicated DEI person to make sure that we, as a city, were going to be effective in addressing these issues. We all knew that this was a need, but Brian was the one who knew how to get it done. Today, we not only have a DEI position that's been created and funded for our entire city, but a designated one for our schools as well. Many people had turned outside to find ways to get this done. All we had to do was turn to Brian, and we were lucky. Don't get me wrong, we didn't always stand side by side on issues. We haven't always seen eye to eye, and we've had our fair share of uncomfortable conversations. And it has been through these disagreements that we've come out on the other side stronger, better legislators, and ultimately better public servants. See, the thing about Brian is, we can disagree about every issue there is, but at the end of the day, I know his intention is one that I'll never disagree with. He cares deeply, is thoughtful, does his homework, and above all else, listens. In this day and age, especially in public service, these qualities that make Brian who he is are rare. He knows when to step up and when to step back. Many times I've relied on him, again, as the experienced, cis, straight, white man, to lead an initiative or a piece of legislation for me. Many times he's pushed back and reminded me that my voice has power as well, that I am here just as he is, elected to serve and work for our community. He has been unapologetic in his confidence in me, and it's given me the push that I still sometimes need today to lean into the power of my voice. It's still not easy, but he's at least made it possible for me. He sees the best in you when you can't see it in yourself. Even coming to speak to you all this morning, my first reaction when asked was that I am not qualified to do this. I am just a daughter of immigrants, keeping my head down, trying to get by. I'm only here in front of you today because Brian sees and continues to remind me of that power of my voice. So preparing for this moment this morning, I thought a lot about what I wanted to say to you. And I recognize that for a hearing on someone else, I've spoken a lot about me. But I want you all to know that the reason that I have is so that you can all know that as a person before you today, the kid who was a newcomer that everyone bet against, the counselor who was the youngest and was never taken seriously, the council president who was the first minority to ever serve our city, the woman who could be in the State House to testify in front of the Governor's Council. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for Brian. And I'm just one person out of many who've been lucky enough to come across him. He embodies what public service means, and he's mastered how to do it well. That in and of itself may not be unique. What is unique about Brian is that he takes every opportunity to pass that along. Brian is a rising tide that raises all ships, and the only singular reason I can think of to not appoint him today is that I selfishly don't want you to take away my tide. However, as someone who has dealt with the system myself, who's had friends who've dealt with the system, and I've heard one too many stories of those who have found themselves dealing with the system, what I would have wanted for myself and those others is to have had a public servant like Brian, someone who's selfless, who listens, who is smart, deeply caring, and genuine, who understands the weight of the role that we take on in these spaces, and has remained steadfast in serving our community with that in mind. I know he will carry that on in his work, not only as an associate justice, but whatever else his future holds. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Councilor Devaney?
I walked in your shoes. I identify with you. And you know what? All politics is local. I was a city councilor for almost 30 years. We're the ones who get the call on Christmas and Thanksgiving. Someone has a broken pipe and flooded in front of their house. So I know that. And we have a little something together. You were the first electricity from York, and I am the first Italian-American woman ever elected since 1780 on this council. So, but no, so you know, and what you said is what very much live by on all elected positions, that you can disagree, but when it's over, have respect for each other. You know, don't publicly embarrass or humiliate or work against. And you said it all. And here's an example. And I'm sure there were times when you were on different paths, whether it was a two-family or a single family. That blew my mind. I couldn't believe that. But so you said it beautifully. So if you would sum it all up, working with working with Attorney Palmucci these years, what do you think he brings to the bench? What quality?
Thank you for your service. It's not easy. 30 years. I'm 7 years in, and it's already enough sometimes to put me past my age. I mean, look, I'll be very frank with all of you. Again, I'm not, growing up the way that I have been, I'm not super familiar with government and politics and how it's supposed to work. And I've been lucky enough mostly to not understand how the justice systems work from being on the other side of it. And so, understanding now what this role means and my experience with, I refer to him as Counselor Palmucci, is that it has to be somebody that can see all sides of an issue and approach it from that perspective, right? Taking your own biases, putting it to the side and coming into a situation, looking at the facts in front of you, and truly digesting all of that. And again, that's where I think we've come to be so close, is that I'm steadfast on my side of the issue. And even if he's completely on the opposite side, he'll take the time to sit down and listen and truly listen, right? And ask questions, and before he makes a decision, say, why I may not agree with you on this, I want to understand truly what your side.
Respect each other's opinions, even if it differs. That's the important thing.
He's taught me how to do that, I think, pretty well in the last 7 years. And I'm grateful for
Well,
that.
your testimony means a lot because you've worked with him now how many years?
7 years now.
7 years. So you really know when there's been something that's really upsetting that has come up. You have a disgruntled person coming, at the podium. And he's handled it. So you think his temperament is good enough.
100%. Yeah. Again, I think that a lot of my success is attributed to what I've learned from him over the years, and I'm in a hearing. So, you think, yeah, she's supposed to say that. But I say that genuinely. I mean, if you look back at who I was when I was 27, running for the first time and not understanding how to even vote on things. I mean, jokes coming up here that this is how we sit in the chambers, but it has always been how we sat, because he'll lean over and say, Nina, it's okay. Pause for a minute, take your time and read through this. And when you're ready, you can speak, you know?
Well, your testimony means a lot to me and continued success as a counselor.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you. Any other, Counselor Duff?
Just thank you, Counselor, for your testimony. Frankly, when you called me and said you were testifying, that probably had more influence. The extended work you do in this community, in this state that you didn't speak about, it had more impact probably than anybody else. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you. Yeah, your testimony was very compelling, and thank you very much for coming.
So thank you.
Thank you. Next, that will exhaust the list of people speaking on behalf of Mr. Palmucci. Is there anyone here who wants to speak in opposition to Mr. Palmucci? You want to come over here, sir? Identify yourself.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Gregory Katapodis, and I sent you about 10 days ago a sworn statement of 16 pages with about 20 exhibits based on my first involvement with Mr. Palmucci, who I did not meet until just a few moments ago out in the hall, and we had a pleasant exchange. And so I deeply regret that I'm here in opposition to his appointment.
Could change your opinion.
I could, and I might. But here is the issue. I outlined it in some detail, in fact, in tedious detail. But I think as I mentioned, I work as a volunteer mostly with minority communities, and came across an instance of a Vietnamese mechanic in Dorchester who lives in Quincy on Furnace Brook Parkway and wanted a variance to replace a house in which his family has lived for a number of years. And in hearing about the case, and then personally examining it and getting into more detail, it raised a number of disturbing issues for me. And the first thing I did was contact Ward Councilor Palmucci for records of hearings and whatever, because he had characterized, and as a counselor, you know this, there's always opposition to change, particularly when it comes to zoning and variance. People like things the way they were or are, but that is not a valid justiciable reason to turn down a legitimate request where there are no problems. And as part of the process in Quincy, which I must say I found to be a rather insular one, where everybody knows everybody and sort of has some processes that they follow that might not be viewed as customary. I, as I say, first contacted Mr. Palmucci because he had held what was a de facto hearing of the neighborhood to get input on this variance. I asked for any records because he had sent out a letter the following day after the hearing to his constituents telling them there was strong and insurmountable opposition to this application. And I was unaware of any, and in talking to Mr. Trong, had not heard of any. So I wanted to see if there was a record. Mr. Palmucci responded that it wasn't, in fact, a hearing, it was just a neighborhood gathering. But he did not keep records of the meeting. He did not know, for example, how many people were in attendance, what they said. He didn't keep any names and addresses of opponents, so it was impossible to address any of their concerns. And then I began looking into it a little further because in my experience, I had been a city council member, and in fact, the president of the council where I lived. And where there's strong and insurmountable opposition, you usually expect people to show up at hearings with pitchforks and torches. And in checking the record through Freedom of Information, there was only one letter in opposition to this particular application. To make a long story short, that application was withdrawn for reasons that still escape me, because the attorney hired to handle this case, former Mayor Phelan of Quincy, who assured his client that he could get this done, he wouldn't take the case, withdrew it without consulting with his accountant.
I just have one,
It's not about Mr. Phelan.
just a quick question so I know where you're coming from. Somebody applied for a variance, and just so I get a clearer picture, a variance to build another house, a house on a lot that was not, give me that sense, I don't know what.
They had an existing lot. The house that he lived in had been originally built in 1880.
How big was that lot?
I'm not sure, I don't have the dimension.
Okay.
I have the whole,
That's okay, that's okay.
but he met the dimensional requirements, and every other lot on that block had been subdivided to allow for the addition of
Is this a single-family home at this
a
point?
single-family home. But at the time that he had submitted the original application, because his existing home had been grandfathered in as a two-family home, his architect thought that they should apply for a two-family. I don't know where they got that. And they should have been advised by Mr. Phelan that it wasn't going to fly.
And what is your, and I got it, then I'll let you continue. Who do you, did you represent, how are you involved in this case, other than it just,
I'm a volunteer, as I stated in the material that I sent you. I was doing an academic project about assimilation of Asians into various Massachusetts communities. And I came across this one and started out investigating it and arrived at a reluctant conclusion.
okay, so you weren't involved in the case, you didn't appear in front of the board, the zoning board? I got, and then I'll let you continue. Did you said you first met Mr. Palmucci today, so you had no contact with Mr.
I
Palmucci?
had no previous contact, no animus, no political.
Trying to get the sense how he's involved with you and that, how,
He's involved because he was the first person I contacted concerning the original application, which to seek information about the case and further study. And as this thing went along, that was over a year ago. What ultimately happened is Mr. Trong withdrew his application and through his architect submitted a new application which better conformed and addressed the one issue raised by one resident who did not live on the block but lived in the neighborhood. So they withdrew that application and submitted a totally new application. And if I could, let me jump to the case. In that application,
I'm trying to get to the point, sir. With all due respect to you, we're here on the nomination of Mr. Palmucci as to whether or not he should be a judge of the district court. If you could tell us your opinion as to his temperament, as to his legal experience, something. I mean, you're talking about a zoning case, which, to be totally honest with you, I don't think anyone has any idea what's going on. Let me just finish on this zoning matter and how he's even involved. And, you know, if you, I'll give you another couple of minutes. But other than that, I mean, I'm lost to find out what you're.
address it specifically. Let me refer to you. I sent you, as I say, 36 pages ahead of time so that you could
Sure.
read what I had to say and the rationale in terms of my opposition. I also, Exhibit 1 is a letter written by Mr. Palmucci. I think we would all agree that the English language is the stock and trade of a lawyer. and their use of language and their attention to details is important as a lawyer. The first thing you noticed in this letter is that he has the wrong address. Okay, let's type that up to a typo. It's just a mistake. But what he does in this letter is conflate two different cases and draw the same conclusion that there was strong and insurmountable opposition for which there is not one shred of evidence, not a letter, not an email, not a phone call, nothing on record at City Hall in opposition, just his opinion. He caused this case, he exerted undue political influence with an independent board, the Zoning Board of Adjustment, by writing this letter and pressing them. Now, this is a board over which he has confirmation appointment. The mayor appoints and the council confirms.
Shaking their head, no, that they don't. Most of the councils are shaking their head, they don't have confirmation authority over it.
It says it in,
I gotta say, it's getting a little out of hand. Let's just, okay, let him continue, but we,
at any rate, he goes on from there. Another thing that a lawyer, I did not know he was a lawyer, and it came as a shock to me. You asked about his qualifications. What sort of lawyer denies due process? He does not allow the proponent of the case to appear before the neighborhood and make their case. And then in the second case, he cancels that hearing altogether and does not hold it. In addition to that, he does what I would call prior restraint in urging the board to reject any further applications. So when you talk about a judge being fair, you talk about judicial temperament, a lack of bias, treating all people equally, et cetera, should be part of judicial temperament. But the most disturbing thing, and I'll end on this, is what he says in his own words is the reason for objecting to this. Another reason is because it threatens the sanctity of the neighborhood. I wrote him a letter on July 22nd in response to this letter, asking him for clarification and saying point blank, this is disturbing to me. It implies it's being used now by extremist groups in terms of sanctity of marriage, and Webster defined sanctity as purity. What do you mean by sanctity of the neighborhood? He refused to respond to that. I also asked that we consult with the Attorney General on the process and whether or not the hearings that he's been holding without keeping records, which are the basis for his objections, should be codified. No answer to that.
thank you for your testimony. Do any of the councilors have any questions of the witness? Councilor Devaney,
This is a matter of the zoning board,
excuse me.
not councilors, so I don't understand why this is coming
I
here.
know, that's right. Do you have any questions of this gentleman?
Okay, first of all, if you had a question of this nominee, I can't believe that you never contacted him, and this is the first time you met him after you sent us 30-something pages.
I had a year of contact with him. I have dozens of emails.
To meet him, to talk with him, talk this over.
He referred me to the city solicitor. In my initial contact with him, I offered to meet with him. He referred me to the city attorney.
But as a counselor, we don't vote on these issues. This is a zoning board issue to make a decision.
I understand that, but you do vote to consider some members of the board.
Oh, my goodness.
And let me just say one other, now that I do not follow your reasoning, because I fully understand what's going on here. You know, I kept asking myself, why would a very well-connected city councilor have to even put in writing what he's put in writing? And the reason is because these are campaign pieces being sent out to constituents to portray himself as a neighborhood preservationist. They're being sent at city expense with misinformation It's just not true. There was no strong and insurmountable opposition. But let me say
Let me
this.
say this, sir, with all due respect, we have a busy schedule.
And I see where this is going.
Appreciate your,
Let me just say this. The next step for me, I've already made contact with the Justice Department and the Office of Civil Rights. And the next step will be to carry it to them and the new Attorney General.
thank you very much, sir. At this point, Attorney Palmucci, before we hear from you, if you have any family or people that you'd like to introduce, you can do that at this time.
Yes, my wife Allison is with me, as is the Honorable Justice Bob Arnaz and the Honorable Justice Catherine Hahn.
Thank you. At this point, we'll hear from you, sir.
Yes, I first want to thank the governor and the lieutenant governor for putting their faith in me and submitting this nomination for your consent. I'd also like to thank the members of the council for taking the time and either talking with me or meeting with me one-on-one and reviewing my background information ahead of today. As you saw from my application materials, I've spent my professional career as a litigator in both criminal and civil matters. I'm well-versed in the type of cases that come before a district court judge. If confirmed, I believe the most valuable attribute or quality that I would bring to the bench is that of my life experiences. Grew up in a working class family. Neither of my parents went to college. I wasn't expected to go to college. I did. I graduated UMass Amherst with honors. I put myself through law school at night while working full-time during the day, including as a furniture mover for Gentle Giant. I was neither a giant nor very gentle with people's furniture, I can assure you. I have a unique background, having been a prosecutor, a defense attorney, a victim, and even a defendant at one time. My history with domestic violence, with abuse, and the child welfare system have made me an empathetic person who can appreciate the experiences of those who would appear me before the district court. It's those experiences that have shaped who I am, both professionally and personally. It's that background that's guided my service for the last 12 years as a city councilor in Quincy. Quincy, as you know, is both a culturally and economically diverse city, which requires patience, understanding, and compassion to serve well. The district that I serve is the most economically and ethnically diverse district in the city. Through my experience in government, I've learned the importance of doing what's right, even when it's not popular. As I've strived to carry out my duties with sound judgment, I've never let the sting of criticism sway me. I'm proud of the work that I've done, and I understand that not everyone's happy with decisions I've made in the past, but I stand by them. I've dedicated my adult life to public service and the law. I see the district court as the intersection where those two areas come together. I'd be honored to have the opportunity to continue my service to both as an associate justice of the district court. I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you. Councilor Duff, any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Attorney Palmucci, and thank you for your patience. What, if you send to the district court, what do you expect to be the biggest challenge you're going to face there?
Well, I think quite frankly, it depends on which court you're sitting in. I think there are different challenges in different courts. I think from my observations, my experiences in the district court, I think one of the most important things for me would be to make sure we put people on an equal footing, regardless of what their cultural background or what their economic background is. So I think that's probably one of the more difficult endeavors of the court to undertake.
That's an interesting answer.
Interesting in a good way?
No, it's just interesting. I've never heard anyone say that was the biggest challenge they would be facing.
I think when you think about bail, sorry.
My suggestion always be just answer the questions, then you got follow-up, follow-up, follow-up.
Sorry.
No, I'm not criticizing at all. It's
Well,
very interesting. What do you, how do you feel about community courts?
I think they play an important role in the process. I think they're helpful.
How? I mean, give me something.
Sure. I mean, I think anytime.
Tell me, give me some.
Sure. I think anytime you can have a specialization in any of the specialized courts that we have.
That's different from a community court. Those aren't the same. I don't consider them the same thing at all.
Well, I think I consider them similar in a sense that you have a different approach to the way in which you're administering justice. Good.
Do you think community courts have a different way of administering justice?
I think from a justice standpoint, you're looking at how you can do things a little bit different than perhaps have been done in the past. So I think in that way that they do.
What do you think about the whole notion from the past administration and this administration, and I'm going to suspect into the next administration, of moving to the hub court system?
Quite frankly, I'm not familiar with it. I was not familiar with the policy change.
How do you feel, what's been your experience employing technology since the COVID crisis in how it's continuing to be used? And what role do you see yourself in that?
Sure. I mean, I think technology plays an important role in the court system now. It obviously was crucial during COVID. I think it provides the court an opportunity to reach people in a way that they haven't been reached before. It allows public to watch, whereas you don't have to go down to the courthouse. You may feel, folks may have felt encumbered.
The public can tune in to watch somebody's hearing?
It's a public session.
In the public session? Okay, so what if it's no, well, go ahead.
Sure, and I think more importantly, it allows folks the opportunity to be in court without perhaps some of the economic burden that they would have otherwise faced. I think of someone who's low income, who's an hourly employee, or has childcare issues. They're paying for someone, or they're missing hours. They can't just take a day off of work. They're missing time from work to appear in court. Now, that's whether they're a defendant, a victim, or someone who's seeking a restraining order. So the opportunity to appear virtually, I think, has a leveling effect on the playing field for folks.
Right. I agree with you. I think the way the courts have employed the technology has been brilliant, and hopefully they will continue to do so. You're 48 years old?
No,
40?
I'm 44. My wife informs me, yeah.
Do you think you're old enough to be on the bench?
I think I have the experience to be on the bench. I don't know what age plays a role.
Here's my concern. You're really young. You're one of our youngest. And nothing against your experience and everything, but that's a long time to sit. What's your long-term game plan? What's your goal?
I don't have one. I don't.
You just want to be a district court judge the rest of your life?
Yeah, I like public service. I love the law, as I said.
Court, you've never thought about what you would do next?
Mhm.
That's stunning. I'm serious. I'm not saying that as a criticism. I'm shocked. I don't know many people that haven't thought about where they're going to be in their life.
I've always been a very ambitious person, but I'll have to tell you, with politics and things, I'll have to tell you the birth of my children really sapped any ambition I had, and I really just focus on the service.
I'm finished for now.
Thank you very much. Councilor Kennedy.
I don't have any questions for you. I already know you. Being around the courts and seeing you in there and the job you do, you definitely have the temperament. You definitely have the experience, and you have what I know Councilor Ianella likes a lot: private practice experience, paying the bills, paying for the lights, paying for the secretary, knowing what it's like for the lawyers that come before you. And how difficult it can be in private practice. So you're a home run. Got a call from Dan Conley last night. I told you about that. I have had multiple calls. Judge Harness chased me down the hall one day to sit down and talk with you. You're a home run. Looking for you next week. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor DiPaolo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. We had a good conversation, and one of the things we talked about was municipal government, and I served on my city's planning board, so I felt some affinity with some of the things we discussed. I did want to ask you just a couple of questions for the record of the hearing. So we talked a little bit about balancing rehabilitation, deterrence, and public safety. And could you just share how you would articulate balancing those factors?
Sure. I think At the district court level, you need to, or I certainly would, take the initial approach of rehabilitation. I would look to see whether rehabilitation is possible first before I look towards punishment.
How would you determine that?
It depends on the facts and circumstances of both the case as well as the person's background, record.
Well, if they have a record they've been in and they clearly have a substance abuse issue they're dealing with, and you see that track record in their history. In that case, is rehabilitation the priority?
In that hypothetical, I think rehabilitation is always potential for someone who's suffering from mental health issues or substance abuse issues. Now, obviously, the line between,
How many strikes does someone get?
I would never put a number on it. I think every situation is different. I would approach it, every situation, with an open mind.
Okay. And you spent time working on sexually dangerous person cases, is that correct?
I did.
And you took some of those to trial?
Every single one goes to trial.
And how many of those about did you?
I'd say probably 60.
So, a sexually dangerous person is different than someone, I suppose, with a substance abuse issue. Certainly, the risk to public safety is very different.
It's different.
What's rehabilitation like in that scenario compared to substance abuse or?
So under the 123A regime, a person, if they're found to be a sexually dangerous person, they are committed from a day to life for the rehabilitation and treatment of their sexual proclivities, which is based on a mental abnormality or a personality disorder. And they're sent to a special prison facility that we have in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Treatment Center, which focuses on sexual behavior therapy. So I think the point is that they be rehabilitated. And they have a right to annual petition for a review by a jury. It's an annual petition in the statute, but it logistically happens about once every 3 years.
You see overlap between the potential for rehabilitation in those two very different populations?
I think everybody has the ability to change themselves with help and perhaps without help.
Have you seen occasions where people you think were sexually dangerous were released into the community?
Yes. And I've seen cases where I thought someone wasn't sexually dangerous and they were held.
We had a good conversation, so I don't need to ask any more questions, but I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Counselor Ferrara.
Thank you. You and I spoke several times, and I appreciate the fact that you also have civil experience. It's important to bring to the bench as well. Counselor Ianella was a big fan of yours early on, told me I needed to vote for you, and you were the real deal, and I have come to know that myself. So without laboring things, you have my support next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Juvenville.
Thank you. How you doing? So I've known you since you were DA in Norfolk. Let me ask you a question. Assuming you get this position and you go to court as a chief judge in that court, right?
Hopefully.
What do you perceive the role of a chief judge of a court is on the other judges in the court?
Good question. You're asking me something that I haven't experienced yet, but I would imagine, my understanding of it is that the chief judge in the court, their role is to assign judges to the different sessions. You're asking me if that would have any effect on the decisions I make? It would not. I would make my own decisions. I've learned as a city councilor, you have to be able to stand by your decisions, and when you let other people unduly influence you, then you can't stand behind those positions.
So do you perceive the chief judge as your boss if you go to that court?
No. I would see them as a resource if I need it, especially if I'm fortunate enough to be appointed in the early portions of my career. I'd imagine I would rely upon those individuals because they have the experience, but I wouldn't make decisions based on anything.
You've had trials in your life, right?
Yes.
So it's come to my attention that in certain courts, if you're scheduled for a trial, show up that day ready to go for trial. The DA talk about the case and you agree to settle it, plea. And it's come to my attention that in some courts, you cannot plead if your case is scheduled for trial. Did you ever hear that?
I have not.
Think about it.
If I'm fortunate enough to sit on the bench, that would not be a policy that I would put in place. I think a defendant has the absolute right to change their plea at any time, including in the middle of a trial if they so choose.
Arraignment until the jury
Comes
determines
back.
guilty or innocent, right?
Correct.
You would allow somebody to plead.
Absolutely.
Have you ever heard of jury waive trials?
Yes.
You ever had any?
Yes.
So, there's some sort of an idea that lawyers judge shop. Have you heard that?
I have heard the term.
I don't know what it means after 43 years, but tell me what you think it means.
I honestly, not. I think it means, again, based on my understanding, is that lawyers will try and pick the best judge for their client in the particular case. I find the term shopping to be, I don't know, condescending. I mean, I think it's,
So how
an advocate is to do the best you can.
I haven't been able to figure out how to do that. I might like to learn how to do that. But if I show up and my case is for trial in a court, I don't have the ability to know what judge is sitting, right? And unless I go to somebody, a judge or a clerk, and say, hey, can you take my case out of courtroom 1 and send it to courtroom 3, which I don't think anybody would do for me, and I would make a fool out of myself by asking. So as a litigator, don't you have an obligation to jury waive with certain judges and not other judges?
I think as an advocate for your client, you are duty bound to do what's in the best interest of your client in that case. And if that means, in your belief that one judge would be better for your client than another judge, then I think you 100% are duty bound and obligated professionally to do everything you can to have the case heard.
Case is on for trial. So I get asked a lot, well, is it going to be a jury waive trial or a judge trial? I said, I don't know at this point. I can't make that decision. 7 Supreme Judicial Court judges have said, in the seat you're in, that it would be ineffective assistance of counsel and malpractice. Leave a jury before you know what judge you're going to be before.
I would agree with that.
Agree with that?
Yes.
That's all I have for you.
Just want to, thank you, just want to add one thing it was my recollection. The 5 or 6, I forget, folks who appeared before us going to the SJC, I think 5 or 6, I forget, said it would be malpractice if you didn't judge shop. I heard your answer, but actually the question was actually asked them, judge shop. Whatever judge shop means to each one, I don't know, but they thought it would be potentially malpractice if someone didn't judge shop. Sure, Councilor Jumbo.
I just want to let you know that Dan Conley called me on your behalf, and Councilor Ianella was very supportive of you right from the beginning.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, we're going to hear, my fault, Mary Hurley. She's on WebEx.
Thank you, Councilor Ianella. I'm on WebEx. I pushed some button that screwed up my video. So I'm here, but you can't see me, but I can see you. I think there's an elephant in the room that I'd like to deal with, and that is the gentleman that spoke in opposition. I don't quite understand. I was a city councilor before I was mayor of Springfield. And if we kept the kind of notes that he says you should have kept, we would have needed another city hall. Uh, That's just not the way as a city councilor, I operated. I would go to meetings, large or small. Um, we had different communities that were represented, and it actually had locations to go to. Um, you get a sense of what's going on, and you do whatever you think is right as it relates to that. I'd like to hear from you as to what this whole thing is all about. First of all, if they're asking for a variance, then they're asking to do something with the property that is not permitted under the zoning laws. Is that correct in Quincy?
That is correct.
All right, can you just tell me in 1,000 words or less, or maybe 100 words or less, just what this whole thing was all about?
I honestly wish I knew, Counselor. I really don't. There was a variance sought by an individual who was represented by very competent counsel. I had a community meeting. I don't keep a video log of that. I don't keep a check-in. It was by Zoom. I also, folks grab me when I'm at the playground with my kids, when I'm grocery shopping, and they express opinions to me all the time. I don't keep notes and records of that, but I do get a sense of whether or not people support a project or they do not. In this particular case, had a community meeting. I told the attorney representing the applicant that there was going to be a lot of neighbors in opposition. So we advised this client to withdraw the application. They did so. At some later date, they refiled it. The city council does not confirm the zoning board. We have no authority or control over the zoning board. In my role as a city councilor, I'm an advocate. I'm a voice for the neighborhoods that I represent. This particular neighborhood and the residents of it were against an individual adding 2 additional single-family homes on a plot of land that was too small to hold 1. So you wanted a total of 3. It did not fit the neighborhood. Neighbors did not want it. I expressed that opinion to the zoning board. I'm sorry that Mr. Katopoulos has only had this limited interaction with me in which he had a, I didn't do, I did everything that I do in hundreds of cases over the course of 12 years, which is advocate for my constituents.
All right, so obviously, to put 3 houses on a plot of land that had trouble fitting 1 is absurd and has nothing to do with bias against a particular nationality. And I'm afraid that this gentleman has jumped to far out conclusions that have nothing to do with reality. And I think he owes you an apology, whether in writing or in person. But you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that the community had every right to be upset, and it had nothing to do with ethnicity. But I think that's important for people to know. At one point in time, when I was running for mayor, somebody in the audience accused me of being anti-Semitic. And I said, that's pretty strange because my boyfriend, then fiance and husband happened to be Jewish. So people can say a lot of nasty things that have no basis in fact. So I'm sorry that you had to put up with those allegations. As for the rest of it, you and I talked. I think that the type of philosophy that you have will fit well in the district court. And I think you've got a good resume, and I do not feel in any way, shape, or form that the opponent who spoke against you made any kind of a case whatsoever in terms of you being prejudiced or biased against any nationality. So I intend to vote for you next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Councilor Marilyn Petito Devaney.
Thank you. Nice to see you again. Thank you for all the time you afforded me. I really appreciate that. It's important to me. I'm full-time. I've met with everyone, probably 1,000 in 23 years. I want to know the whole person, and I really got to know you. First of all, to put this aside, the governor appoints 21 lawyers who have some responsibility to choose someone to recommend for a judgeship or magistrate. And they work hard. I have an issue with the chair because he's never had the 21 people there. He only has 10 or 12. But I can't do anything about it in this administration. So how many were there?
My JNC interview, it was difficult to tell because half were on a giant screen and half were seated, but if I had to estimate, I'd say maybe 12 to 14.
Yeah, right. So, so at least 6 people didn't see you or hear you. But anyway, with that aside, I have to tell you, you bring a life experience that I don't see in 23 years. And it's so needed. Abuse, domestic violence, you've lived it. So when these people come before you, you've walked in their shoes. That's important to me. So let me get this aside. As an elected city councilor, what does that experience bring to you as a judge? What does that bring to you?
Sure, so I guess as a city council, I've really, especially representing Quincy, I've learned that you have to communicate with different people in different ways. So Quincy is 30% Asian American, and I've come to learn through the course of my city council that in particular Asian cultures, especially we have a lot of immigrants from China, they come from an authoritative government where their first instinct isn't to call the government for help, isn't to call the city councilor to try and get something done. And so you need to develop a different way to communicate folks. And so when it comes to perhaps a neighborhood where there's an issue going on, which is predominantly Asian, instead of just sending a letter, I might go and knock on doors and talk to folks to put a face to them. So
I've been there, and you can't please everyone. Have been there, partial, and we're not going to see here with happy. I wouldn't bring this up. It's personal. It's interesting. I need that and I think it's important because we need judges who have mental health and substance abuse experience, and you do. And you have as much experience in the Superior Court as you do in the District Court, which I think is outstanding. I like that you were in your own practice and you chose your but getting back to your personal, someone else in your position as a judge could never understand that person before you. 2 young boys. So it's difficult to even say, who were forced to have sexual encounter with each other, how that affects their lives for the rest of their lives. And you were abused by a family friend, and domestic abuse with your mother and you. So I think you have an understanding, and not only when you're representing that person, but what I would talk with you and seeing from your application, you really got involved with that person. And you really revealed yourself, which usually an attorney doesn't do that. So tell me, with these people who have been sexually abused, how do we help them? I have a friend, and his daughter was sexually abused at a daycare center, and it was all over Massachusetts. And she was 4 years old. She's the most beautiful looking girl you'd ever see. She's been engaged twice, and she's never been involved in a lasting commitment because of that. So they really have taken their lives away from these children. What kind of remedy do you try to give these people?
sure,
As a judge, what would you, and as your experience as a lawyer?
sure, sexual abuse or any physical abuse will deprive somebody of a certain sense of security. They approach life, I think, in a different way. And I think one of the things that we can do in the criminal justice system, even in the civil justice system, is to understand trauma and the effect that it has on people and take that knowledge with us if I'm fortunate enough to oversee cases like that, and to understand that, when you're weighing credibility and you're weighing as Councilor DiPaolo had asked, whether or not rehabilitation is something that's possible. I think you have to take everything into account that someone has gone through in their life and make those kind of determinations.
The other thing is, you know, we hear about it, but really people don't really center on it and realize that postpartum, you know, stress disorder is prevalent with our service people. And what do you see? Do you think we're doing enough, and what can we do?
I think we can always do more.
Oh, sure.
I think over the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so, the courts have really tried to do more, and it's heading in the right direction. One of the cases I cited in my application, and actually the case that Judge Bradley was talking about today, was a service member who did 2 tours of duty in Iraq, came back, had complex PTSD, and he turned to heroin. And so he was someone without a record, and he went through this situation where he gets into this incident with police, and I knew it wasn't him. And that's why I worked so hard to try and help him, not just with the criminal case, but also through his addiction. And he's doing wonderful today. We'll never see him back in court unless he's there for jury duty.
And, you know, I'm time, so I can't go into the different cases because that I'm really concerned about. But to me, your life experience is so rounded, and you can understand, you lived it, you've been there. And so you can identify with these people. What do you think that's your greatest strength that you're bringing?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
I do too.
I think you have to understand people in order to judge them, or to judge their case.
You can say, I understand to someone, but I can say it, but I don't know what that must be. It must be awful to live that every day, because we grow up trusting family and family friends. And if you can't trust them, and how many of them are not believed? How many of them go to a mother and the mother doesn't believe them? And that's that's why we need a judge that has lived it and is understanding of it. So I'm concerned with drug addiction. And I see it, and we're not winning the battle, that's for sure. And so there's not enough drug rehab, and I've been talking about that. What do you see as a judge that you can do for someone that is addicted? Not a criminal, not a bad person. What can you do?
First and foremost, I think, is understand the nature of addiction, and understand the nature of sobriety. Sobriety isn't a straight line. Someone might have a relapse. They might be before you after being sober for a year and have a traumatic, a parent pass away or something, and they use, and then they're before you for a bad screen on a drug test. And so I think the best thing that you can do is have an understanding that sobriety isn't A to B. It's a whole windy path to get. So you have to understand people and the nature of addiction.
Have you followed up on some of these people that you really got close to, that you identify with, and you identified yourself as knowing that you have walked in their shoes? Do you follow up after the case is over?
I do. Yeah, they wanted to come here, and some of them wanted to come here, and I said, no, you can write a letter if you want. But no, I keep, I think any attorney will have clients who they formed a special bond with, keeping their heads in their mouths as they move forward.
This is kind of far afield, and it really doesn't relate to you. But I am concerned, and there's nothing done about it. There are women who drink through their whole pregnancy. They give birth to a baby that has. I have a friend who has a child like that. And it just seems like there's no penalty to that woman who has taken really a life away from this child. It has decreased their brain ability and their physical stature and everything. And it breaks my heart because I see that little boy. And I'm just wondering, why isn't there some law that we can prosecute people for doing that? I mean, there's health that was given to this particular woman, and she just father, and that's what happened to her little boy. I'm just wondering, is there any possibility there would be some kind of something like that?
As a judge, I don't make the laws. I would be ruling upon them, but I would respectfully disagree with your premise that the mother has taken the life. As a parent of a little boy who was born substance addicted, I can tell you that he lives a very full life, and his whole future is wide open to him.
It's so sad, it really is, because the father is so loving and he does everything for him. He's all, tries to get all kinds of, treatments for him and all. Now, as I said, there's a lot of the cases I really wanted you to talk about, but tell me about the writings. I like your writings, and that's very important, to be able to write. And I want to know about the guilty plea for Derek and in that case, there were two. Would you talk about that?
Sure. In that particular case, I filed an appeal on behalf of a client who he did not realize he was pleading guilty to two offenses, to an offense involving two victims. Both victims were listed on the application of complaint, but neither victim was listed on the complaint. I think it's important when a defendant is pleading guilty that they understand entirely what it is that they're admitting to have done. And I thought in this particular case, there was no record of the plea. There was no recording of the plea. I thought that it was the client did not realize, and this is from interacting with him. It's not illegal. He said, I didn't plead to that. What are you talking about? I said, no, it's right here. So we filed that appeal. Unfortunately, the appeals court disagreed.
I know the chair shares my feelings about having someone that's been in private practice, because you've been there. You have to pay the rent and pay for if the printer breaks, you gotta shovel the snow. But what I think of is when that person comes before you and you have a client, you are sensitive to that client knowing they're paying a lot for the lawyer. And I know everybody comes in at 9, but I think that you could make some kind of arrangement that you take that person first or whatever. How can that be done? Because it just seems like, everybody comes in at 9.
Sure. I think that the use of technology is something that can help with that a lot. In my private practice, I know I've had a court hearing in one part of the state at 9, and then very far away in a different court at 10, and I'm able to make both of them because I can do it by Zoom. So that's helped a lot.
But also, besides your private practice, you've been in the district attorney's office, you've been in the Department of Correction. Let's go back to the Department of
And
Correction.
excuse me,
I have been,
excuse me, Counselor,
tell me,
one more minute. You have one more minute.
isn't this awful, it's ridiculous. But anyway, so what I see in Bridgewater, and I'm gonna throw this out, and it really doesn't apply to you, but I hope you'll remember this. I visited the prisons, and there are inmates in Bridgewater who are literally dying. They're not getting the medical help that they should. And there's someone over this whole correction system. And so you're the first person that I've thrown this out to, and I hope you'll look into that, because every life is precious, and that could be your brother or your son or your father, whatever. And so I'm just wondering if there's some way that judges can look into that, because I'm particularly talking about Bridgewater, okay? And what I saw in the different prisons, there's a different climate. When I went to Norfolk, the prisoners were in, which I thought was great. They had, sport shirts and all that. When I went to Bridgewater, all uniforms, very regulated. Why isn't, I just want to throw that out. Why is one different than the other? They should all be community-based. I don't know. But I just want to give out my opinion. But I'm very pleased with your background. I mean, you have it all. And I'm just really pleased that you got through. Not if you sometimes the political jump the line. I've seen it through the years, and you made it. And I wish you all good luck, and I know you'll be a great judge.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you very much, Counselor. I don't have any questions. We had a lengthy conversation. We met for quite some time. I've known you over the years. I think you're going to be a great addition to the district court. If you can be half as good as Judge Bradley, you're going to do a great job. And no, you definitely have the temperament, the experience, and I look forward to putting your name before the council next week. Thank you very much.